Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episodes 1 and 2 of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building, titled The Show Must Go On and The Beat Must Go On, respectively. I'm not going to spend too much time, if any, talking about the episode titles going forward. I just don't think they're that important as it pertains to the episode. You know, with Succession, they tie in so thematically, and it can be a thing where it's like, oh, it's based on this poem. Whereas, like, this is pretty obvious. Both these titles refer to the, I think, very clear themes in these episodes. Oliver's desire to keep the show going after Ben's death, and his desire to keep his heart going after his minor heart attack. So not going to spend too much time, not going to spend any further time on these episode titles. I'm probably not going to talk about them going forward. Maybe I'll say what they are just out of habit, but who knows. Anyway, one of my favorite things about this show is how unexpected my admiration for it is. You know, everything about this show made me expect to not like it. I was indifferent towards Steve Martin and Selena Gomez, and I actively dislike Martin Short. Disliked in the past tense now. But I just didn't see this show working for me. And it wasn't until I did like a Best of 2021 podcast, and I heard this show mentioned several times, that I decided to give it a shot. And I was richly rewarded because I truly, truly enjoy this show. I find all of the three leads to be great. I think the two male leads, Martin Short in particular, are dialed down to the appropriate level of themselves, and it really works for this show. If Martin Short was any more Martin Short, I probably wouldn't like it. And then there's something I think oddly comforting about Selena Gomez. Maybe it's her relaxing voice or kind face, but she's virtually impossible not to like, I think. I like that she has, I think, surprisingly good comedic timing. I like the sarcasm of her character. Like, I don't know. I just like everything about Selena Gomez's character. And then, of course, I like the mystery-solving aspect of this show as well, and how it kind of has this old-school Clue kind of vibe. Great theme music, great soundtrack. I even like the music that plays during when they're like, last time on, like the recap. I even like that music. So, needless to say, I was quite excited for this show to come back. It's one of my favorites. And I think these first two Season 3 episodes are pretty consistent with the show we've seen so far. But with some changes that I think will actually keep the show fresh. Obviously, the cast got a massive fucking upgrade, adding Meryl fucking Streep to this cast. And then also, of course, Paul Rudd. But we also get out of the Arconia quite a bit, spending the vast majority of the runtime in these first two episodes somewhere else other than in the Arconia. And these first two episodes also changed up the formula in a few other ways. For starters, we have a time jump from the end of Season 2 to the start of Season 3, which is different from the start of Season 2, which picked up right where Season 1 left off. And then also we consistently, at least in these first two episodes, jump back and forth in time from the present, following the death of Ben Glenroy, which is Paul Rudd's character, to months prior, where we will undoubtedly see a buildup of the killer's motive. Speaking of Ben Glenroy, that's another interesting change, is that he dies, everyone thinks he's dead, and then he comes back. But with a strange cough and taking mysterious phone calls, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Then he dies again for real in the Arconia. And at first, I would think that I wouldn't like a fake out like that, but I don't mind it that much. But the thing that bothers me about it is I was actually very intrigued at the idea of not having a death at all, and the mystery being trying to solve who tried to kill Ben. Like, I thought that would have been an interesting way to kind of like change things up. Or to have a completely separate person die altogether. Like, we come into this thing thinking like, oh, the end of season 2 tells us that Paul Rudd is going to be the victim. Season 3 opens with Paul Rudd being the victim, and then he comes back like, what does he say? Who farted? Like, he comes back like, who farted? And it's like, oh, now a different person is dead. I thought that would have been a cool little twist, and a nice way to change things up. But they didn't do that. They still ended up killing him. I thought that would have been a real jolt of energy to the show, so I was a little bit disappointed. But at least he wasn't alive long enough for me to get even used to the idea of him being back. But that's my only really real complaint so far. But now real quick, before I talk even more in depth about the episode, I want to talk about how I plan on covering this show, just real quick. Basically, it's the same thing I did last season. I'm just going to go over what we learned each week and use that info to kind of theorize about what the show might be up to. That's about it. This video, just because it's the first one, I have kind of like this like intro portion here that's been going on for about 5 minutes. But yeah, that we'll dispense with that going forward. Like, I don't have to introduce characters, which I'm gonna have to do which I'm going to do in a little bit. But a lot of that stuff we'll dispense with that going forward. So let's get into it. So the season opens with us learning about Loretta Durkin. That's Meryl Streep's character. She got bit by the acting bug as a kid and has been obsessed ever since, but she's never been able to fully get on. So she ends up ultimately at now Meryl Streep's current age, auditioning for Oliver's play, and she Meryls the fuck out of the audition. Absolutely incredible. I'm just sitting here like, wow, she can really just turn it on like that. It's crazy. And Oliver gives her the "Where have you been" moment that she's been pining for, per Charles' narration at the beginning of the first episode. We also learn more about Oliver's play, which was only teased at the end of last season to set up Paul Rudd's death, but it's called Death Rattle because of a murder in a lighthouse in Nova Scotia, and you think the setting wouldn't be that important until you hear Meryl Streep doing that French Canadian accent, but a murder in a lighthouse in Nova Scotia in which an infant or a baby is the only witness. Very terrible concept, terrible premise. But speaking of Meryl, we all know she's one of, if not the greatest actors who has ever lived, but I don't know how she continues to find new ways to impress me. Like, Meryl Streep is such a great actress that she comedically convinced me that she's a bad actress. Like, I'm sitting here like, I know this is Meryl Streep. But like, yeah, she's a shitty actress right now. And she's funny while doing it. She's incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. But the best scene, unsurprisingly, the best scene in these entire first 2 episodes was Meryl Streep's character at that table read, doing those accents, and then being unable to perform entirely when she has to be herself. Like, the Scottish accent took me smooth the fuck out. like that was, I didn't even know she had that. It's kind of like how, not to the same degree, because I'm now accustomed to Meryl Streep playing different types of roles, but when Robert De Niro did Meet the Parents, that was like totally blew me away. And that's kind of like, I'm not to that degree with Meryl being funny in this, but it was still kind of like shocking, like, wow, she's this funny. But this moment, the moment of her doing the accents, kind of dovetails nicely with a moment involving Paul Rudd's character, Ben, where he says the same thing that she says. Well, she doesn't say it, but the idea of her being, I think she does say it. The idea of her being not able to perform when she has to be herself, how she kind of struggles with saying these lines in her normal voice. Ben's character expresses doubt about being any good if he's not playing a character in a ridiculous concept like, was it Girl Cop or Cobro? You know? So I think that's interesting too, that they kind of like aligned those two as having similar perspectives and experiences. Meryl Streep and Paul Rudd's character, especially, it's interesting because over the course of this season, we are inevitably going to see how these two people who seem to have a lot in common, being unable to be themselves as actors, needing to be some sort of weird character, and both being bitten by the acting bug at 8 years old, how are they going to end up hating each other so much? I think that's probably the most intriguing plot line going forward, is what what's going on between the two of them. But while we're on the subject of Paul Rudd's Ben, let's talk about him for a little bit. Like I said, we learned that at 8, he got a role on Brazos, Charles' show. But Charles got him fired, and this had an impact on his life going forward, including the way he behaves right now. That the whole going with who farted or whatever that thing he says, all of that kind of over-the-top behavior he credits as kind of like an overcompensation for how Charles made him feel by getting him fired from Brazos. And Ben is obnoxious at the table read, but it's more of a like he's being fake as fuck kind of obnoxious. But as we learn in the present day scenes, over the course of time between the table read and his death, it seems like he probably made a lot of enemies. Because another great scene is when he does come back from the dead and he's walking around kind of apologizing to everyone. That scene served as, one, both being funny, but two, informing us of potential motives for everyone else that was in that room. And that's how we learned that he basically gave everyone a reason to hate him in one way or another. I loved in that scene, too, how he kept harping on the unnecessarily shitty dressing room that he has, and how he kept calling Cliff Boy, even though Cliff told him his name during the conversation. He still calls him Boy afterward. I thought that was funny. Speaking of Cliff, that presents a great segue into talking about some of the new characters we meet in these first 2 episodes as well. So let's kind of like go over those real quick. So when I mention them going forward, we'll all know who we're talking about. There might be some that I don't have right here, but I just put the ones that stood out to me as people who the show might focus on as potential murder suspects. So we have Donna and Cliff DeMaio. They're the producers for Oliver's play. They're the ones who are mother and son, but they sure as fuck don't kiss like it. But it's fine because Cliff is gay. Then we have Ben's manager. His name's Dickie. He's also Ben's brother. And then we have the cast of Oliver's play, and I expect at some point each of them will have an episode in which the show paints them as a likely killer. We have Kimber, played by Ashley Park. She's apparently on Emily in Paris, but I've never seen that show. My wife watches it. Bobo, who is played by Don Darryl Rivera. He was in Showtime's Let the Right One In, but I don't remember him from that, so I don't know. Maybe he didn't have a major role. Ty, who is played by Gerald Caesar. He was in Dear Evan Hansen, which I also haven't seen. And then last but not least, and I don't know if he'll be around consistently, we have Jesse Williams of Grey's Anatomy fame playing a documentarian named Robert, who's making a documentary about Ben. And I also want to throw in, now that I also want to throw him in too as a potential random person that has done this crime. He's doing this documentary about Ben. Feels like he could have drummed up a little animosity toward Ben during this time as well. And it would be, I feel like it's in the show's wheelhouse to have Jesse Williams in this season being like, I'm the killer, and have some scene where he's just like completely ridiculous. Feels likely. But let's close out by talking about more of what we learned and theorizing a little bit. So consistently throughout these episodes, Mabel is very intent on getting the gang back together. We know it's been a while since they solved the murder, and thus since they've been podcasting. She's never really sought out the company of Charles and Oliver like she does in these first 2 episodes. So she's really gung-ho about podcasting and solving crimes again. And then we also learned that she's moving and she's going to be leaving the Arconia in 4 weeks. Now, I don't think this is the case, but you got to expect that the show at some point is going to again point the finger at Mabel as a potential murderer, because it allows her to stay connected with her friends, which she clearly desperately wants. So if she's like, I gotta facilitate the murder in order for us to get together and solve a murder, so be it. I think that might be the motive that they might try to give her at some point. Now, I'm not putting any stake in that theory. I don't think Mabel did it, but yes, I do expect the show will attempt to make us think that at some point. And if Mabel did do it, it would be the least surprising plot twist of all time. But they've also clearly established that she has a thing for Ben as well, so maybe they won't try to make us believe that, but I don't know, her passionate desire to hang out with Charles and Oliver felt more than just like, hey, I'm leaving in 4 weeks and I want to hang with my friends. Like, it felt like, I don't know, it felt like a little bit more than that. So we also find out that Loretta and Oliver, or at least Loretta, has developed something of a romantic desire for Oliver. Maybe they have collectively developed a romantic relationship. You can't tell because Loretta says that now that the play is off, maybe he can give up his rule of keeping things platonic. That could mean that they have a secret relationship, but it also could be the excuse that he gave her for not wanting to be with her. So maybe she thinks, oh, the play is what's stopping me and Oliver from being together. If I kill Ben, the play is off, and now me and him can be together. They might go in that direction as well. Feels a little obvious. I don't think that'll be the case either, but I did want to throw it out there because it feels like they're setting that up. The killer will be someone who I think at this point, like I said, seems entirely irrelevant. Someone like Cliff or Robert, Jesse Williams' character, or that one woman who was arguing with Howard about the handkerchiefs. She was the stage manager or something. She's taking out that dummy that had the rattle in its mouth. Someone like that, who's kind of like a background character that they're not paying much attention to. It'll probably be someone like that. But I do expect them to set up Mabel, like I said, and Loretta, like I said. I do expect them to kind of like put that out there, but I don't think it'll be that. So Ben returns from the dead with a story about what happened in the hospital that should lead all of us to believe that he faked his death somehow. But the question is why, to what end, and how? Especially because like they said, he said he was dead for an hour. Like that suggests that everyone who was at the theater at the time that he died believed him to be dead. Was he really dead? Did he fake it? I don't know. And if he did, how did he do something that convinced all those people that he was actually dead? I don't know. But what I do know is when he returns, he does a lot of like hacking and coughing. And then he takes a phone call very mysteriously and then ends up dead for real. So I think that's kind of a clue. I also noticed that after Oliver recovered from his minor heart attack, that he was coughing as well. And I don't know what that means. I don't have a hypothesis, but I noticed it. And I don't know. It's interesting to me that I'm going to assume Ben faked his death. He faked his death, and for whatever reason, when he comes back, he's got some bad cough. And then Oliver, doesn't fake his death, but dances on death's doorstep with a heart attack, and then he comes back with a cough. It makes me wonder if there's some sort of, like, medication or something that would have been given to both of them that they are both allergic to that would have resulted in that cough. I don't know. And maybe the cough isn't something to be made note of, but I noticed it. And lastly, the final clue in the first two episodes revolves around Greg having Ben's handkerchief. So Greg's the guy who paints himself as Ben's security, but we find out he's just a psycho stalker. So what handkerchief was Ben holding when he died if Greg had Ben's handkerchief? Now, Mabel and Charles run off a number of ways in which that could have happened. Maybe it was around the neck. Maybe it was in the pocket. Maybe it was in the hand. None of which we could attempt to affirm because we don't have any evidence at all of what happened in that moment. But we're definitely going to want to think about this handkerchief going forward. So, for instance, Howard and, again, that woman, like I mentioned earlier, the one who I said is probably going to be the killer, the stage manager with the glasses, they both argue with each other about assistants and stage managers getting the same gift, the handkerchief, that was given to cast members. So if we want to use the handkerchief as a possible clue, we should probably look at those two since they argued about it and both got one as non-cast members. Howard's a recurring character who's been on the show already. The other woman, I don't even know her name yet. So if she's new, if I had to choose one as the possible killer, it would be her. They obviously haven't given any evidence, but my evidence of it's probably going to be a rando and this person has an handkerchief that probably shouldn't have gotten one. I feel like it's probably her. I just don't have any evidence yet. So I'm going to close with a couple of quick thoughts and we'll be all set. Oliver makes a joke about Charles not having acted since men had to play women, which is a reference that I got. Okay, so I'm going to share this with you guys. This is a little personal thing. I got the reference because I'm essentially training to be on Jeopardy. I feel like that's something that I could do, and I feel like it's something that with a little bit more studying, I could end up doing. And my goal is to get on there and win. Like, my goal isn't to get on the show. If it was, I'd take the test now and see what happens. But my goal is to actually get on the show and win. So I don't want to take the test until I feel like I'm capable of winning. So if I take the test that I do well and they do an interview or whatever, they're like, we want this guy on now. And then I'm unprepared and I go on there and I make an ass of myself or I lose. I don't want that. I want to feel like I can go on there and win. I don't feel like that yet. So I'm kind of studying and preparing. I consider Shakespeare to be my biggest weakness. I don't know shit about Shakespeare at all. Like, the way Shakespeare stuff is written, it might as well be in fucking German. I have no clue. So I got a book that's kind of like, it's not Shakespeare for Dummies, but it's kind of like that. It kind of like breaks down all of his plays and all this kind of stuff. All that to say, I learned about that reading up on Shakespeare. I learned that men used to have to play the women in his plays. And then later, there's another Shakespeare reference / joke when that Greg character that I mentioned earlier, he quotes Hamlet, and then Mabel was like, Hamlet? And he's like, no, Greg, which I thought that was funny, but I took 2 Shakespeare references as a sign that I should continue my Jeopardy quest. Side note, doesn't Greg kind of look like an ethnic Jack Black? I think so. Oh, and then Jeopardy itself is directly mentioned by Oliver after Charles names all these parts of this church, right? And one of the things that he named was transept, which was the answer to a clue on an episode of Jeopardy that I watched yesterday. Now, granted, it was a rerun from the Second Chance tournament that was earlier in the year, but I watched it yesterday, and then the category was something like September or something like that, and it had Sep in quotes, which let you know that every answer was going to have SEP in that order contained within the word. And transept was one of the answers. So when he said that, he was like, oh, that's the transept. I was like, I know what that is. I just saw it on Jeopardy yesterday. So like, all that to say, I kind of now I went from thinking like, oh, I should continue my quest to be on Jeopardy. I am now in a place where like, that shit's my fucking destiny. Like, it's not going to be 3 things that are going to remind me of my Jeopardy quest in these opening 2 episodes of Only Murders in the Building. And I'm just going to be like, yeah, coincidence. Nah, man. It's meant to be, y'all. So just brace yourselves for that moment. Anyway, I love this quote from Ben. He said, the people who figure shit out right away are boring. Late bloomers like us make the world go round. He said this to Mabel. You can afford to take your time. And I thought that quote really resonated with me. I feel like that's how my life's played out. Like I've kind of come into a lot of aspects of my life. I feel like at a late point, my understanding of life, my understanding of people, my understanding of a lot of things, I feel like it's just kind of coming around this channel. You know, I'm 41 years old. Like I'm not necessarily part of the YouTube crew, but I feel like I'm at the forefront of people my age coming to the understanding that working a 9-to-5 job isn't the only way to get paid. And I got a whole lot of shit that I do. And I feel like that applies to me. Like I'm kind of coming on late in life and figuring shit out a little bit later, but I'm in a unique position. I'm enjoying it. So, I also love the scene at the funeral where Oliver discovers that they've been put in Overflow 3, which it's funny enough that they're not in the main room, but the third Overflow, Overflow 3, like not even Overflow 1, Overflow 3, and then it's the same one that Mabel's in, and I'm gonna call him Martin Short. Oliver is like a complete stranger, isn't Overflow 3? Like I thought that was a really great gag. So, like I said. This show it's the same as it's ever been. It's not any worse. They're trying to make it better, keep it fresh. I think everything's working. The only thing I didn't like was the Ben fake out because I actually got into a place where I'm like, oh, they're going to do something really different. And they didn't. So that was a little bit disappointing. But otherwise, same old show. I'm in. I will see you guys every week with more theories, more hypotheses. I look forward to being right about something that I predicted in this video. I don't know. We'll see. I'll see you guys next week for episode 3. And until then, peace.